corporations can't invoke the Fifth. In a letter to the committee explaining his refusal to comply with the subpoena, Flynn's lawyer asserted that his client had been, quote, the target on a nearly daily basis of outrageous allegations. Flynn also previously requested immunity in exchange for testimony, which he was not granted. Meanwhile, in the House investigation into ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, Democrats are citing new evidence against Flynn and pushing for another subpoena. Congressman Elijah Cummings wrote to House Oversight Chair Jason Chaffetz saying the committee, quote, has in our possession documents that appear to indicate that General Flynn lied to the investigators who interviewed him in 2016 as part of his security clearance renewal. Joining me now, Naveed Jamali, MSNBC contributor, former FBI double agent, author of How to Catch a Russian Spy. Naveed, let's start with the allegation by Elijah Cummings. They have evidence that he lied to the people interviewing him when he was getting a security clearance review. How big a deal is that?
Well, it is a big deal. It's a big deal for two reasons. The first one is the sort of pragmatic one, which is, you know, it's potentially a crime. If he did this knowingly and there was an intent to, you know, to sort of cover something up here. The second one is on the counterintelligence side. You know, when someone purposely misleads something in regards to an SF-86, which is this form that is a security background questionnaire, when someone purposefully leaves something off, if you are a counterintelligence officer, if you're a security officer, it raises a red flag. Besides for the obvious reason of the illegality, it shows potentially an attempt to deceive, and that is, you know, that is a very troubling thing.
I want to just run down, because I give a sense of this and get your reaction to. I mean, here are some of the problems Flynn currently has in terms of when you talk about that sort of deception, right, as a red flag. He did not clear his RT payments as required by Army regulations, it appears. He allegedly didn't disclose those foreign payments in the security clearance interview, which you just talked about, did not register as a foreign agent while working for the Trump campaign, and then lied about the nature of his contacts with Russian ambassadors. So that, whether he did anything wrong, there is a pattern here that, as you say, it would seem to me would raise some red flags.
That's absolutely right. Again, taking the question of illegality or criminality aside for one moment, if you're looking at this and you're a security officer and you're going to make the determination if this person warrants or meets the criteria to be given a security clearance, you're going to have very, you know, serious concerns about issuing that clearance. So it shows a pattern potentially of deception, and you know that is the thing that really does trouble me. I mean, we know what happened from 2014. We know what happened most recently in 2017, but there's a large gap of several years where we don't know exactly what Mr. Flynn was doing.
You know, I was watching the testimony of Brennan today, and there was sort of a light bulb moment for me, particularly with this back and forth about collusion, cooperation. And you've been very clear about your skepticism of open collusion or conspiring simply because of the tradecraft of Russian intelligence. They're not going to just sit down and be like, hey, I'm a Russian spy, let's figure out how we can work together. And Brennan said this thing that I thought of conversations you and I have had in that regard. Take a listen.
I've studied Russian intelligence activities over the years and have seen it, again, manifest in many different of our counterintelligence cases, and how they have been able to get people, including inside of CIA, to become treasonous. And frequently, individuals who go along that treasonous path do not even realize they're along that path until it gets to be a bit too late.
How does that relate to your awareness of how Russian intelligence or any intelligence agency operates in terms of cultivating people without them even realizing they're being cultivated?
That's exactly right. The Russians are so sophisticated when it comes to this. And, you know, I would call it the romance phase. There's this part when, you know, and I was dealing with a GRU, a legit military intelligence officer. And, you know, Chris, he never actually said to me, we want you to commit treason and spy on your country. There's a very nuanced and careful, slow progression where they're just, you know, they're sussing you out. They're determining if you're real. And this concept that someone's going to sit down with you, and exactly as you said, and say, you know, I want you to spy, it's unlikely. So that's exactly right. It's this very slow dance, and it can take years. They're also incredibly paranoid, and they're constantly looking for any signs that you perhaps may have been co-opted. So what Brennan said rang absolutely true. It's a slow dance.
What I'm hearing from you then is that there's a possibility that if this idea of collusion, which is two collaborators exchanging information, it could be the case that Russians are pulling off this operation of active measures in terms of the hacking, while also attempting to essentially compromise or infiltrate, in a sort of unilateral sense, agents around the Trump campaign.
That's exactly right. So if you think, going back to that timeline with Flynn, we talk about 2014 when he was, essentially fired by President Obama. A sort of bitter general would be a perfect target for the Russians.
Right.
And again, the way that they would make an approach. I mean, this is how I would do it if I were them. They'd make an approach, and that approach may not be illegal. That approach may not even raise the concerns of Mr. Flynn, who's a 30-plus year veteran of the intelligence community. So it is exactly right. They might build a network of people. This is what they do. And then what's very curious, Chris, that all these people potentially ended up in the Trump campaign. That's the big question.
Yeah,
but you're right.
Yeah, it just seems like that this space that it has to be reckoned with in terms of that there's a sort of cartoonish image that we're going to find some plot in which people were sitting down in the back of a restaurant.
Right.
And this to me seems to me like a more fruitful line of sort of thinking through this problem. Naveed Jamali, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
The White House unveiled the Trump budget today with massive cuts to many of the things candidate Trump said he would protect. We'll show you who would be hurt the most after this quick break.